having bought a number of small companies, and frankly having sold my company to bigger companies a couple of times, buying a small company is different. There are lots of books out there. There's 50 books that I probably read on how to do big mergers and acquisitions, integration work. But in a small company, there's a few things that are different. I want to walk you through 8 steps or eight things to consider in buying a small company. The first thing is, if you're buying a big company, you pretty much want the business. You're not going to buy, a $100 million a year revenue stream and not care about the $100 million revenue stream. That certainly happened in the world, but it's pretty rare. But when you're buying a small company, you may be buying the business, or you may be buying the talent or the intellectual property to apply to your business. Lots of these kind of deals happen all the time. Facebook buys companies like this all the time. LinkedIn's bought a few companies like this, where you're really trying to not buy the business, you're trying to buy the talent. You need to make a decision early on whether you're buying the business or you're buying the talent. If you're buying the business, you need to keep that business separate at least for 18 months and let them develop on their own with minor points of integration and have their own success with their own GM, etc. If you're buying the talent, you need to, as quickly as possible, move that team off the existing product and inject them into your business as to what you're trying to do. So you're trying to improve, your search on your internet site, and you bought a search team. You need to move them off building their search product and into your search product as quickly as possible. Even if you do that, though, whether you are keeping the existing business or you're moving it into moving the talent into your operation, you've got to respect what that team built in terms of product and customer relationships. This is what they sold their soul for 2 or 3 years. And if you piss their customers off, or you dismiss their product and don't show respect, you're going to end up with a lot of very frustrated engineers, especially, and people who are very unhappy, and you're going to end up destroying the value. Even though you only wanted the team in some cases, the team's going to leave because they're embarrassed about what you did to their product. I've seen this happen where people will open source the product after they buy it as a way of making sure the product survives and people can be, that's sort of what they built can survive. I've seen it where you focus on keeping their customers happy, maybe even add a little bit of a loss for a period of time so that it's not, you don't end up with a lot of negative ill will against the team, because the team will leave if they feel that ill will. Next thing you have to really do when you think about this is you have to make an immediate decision who's going to stay. In my experience, if you're buying a company in the growth space, in the internet space, in the technology space, and you intend for more than 15% of their people to leave, you're probably doing a bad deal. But you probably are going to have 15% leave. You should know who those 15% are before you do the deal. You and the seller should know who those people are. You should decide, day one who they're going to be, and send them for stay there a sort of period of time as you want, and then get them out so that you can move on to building a new leadership team. If you don't want this certain members of senior leadership, then make that decision early on. Treat them with respect, but make the decision early on. And then the rest of the team, the 85%, don't lose any of them. Every person you lose, you need to look at as a failure. Because remember, in a small company, everybody plays a critical role, both in what they do every day as well as part of the DNA of the company. So take the 15% out and then don't lose a single other person. And on the next point, it really ties to that. Certainly don't lose people over things that don't matter. Things like benefits or other small things in the company that really aren't going to change the financial outcome of the company. Don't meddle with those things. In fact, if you're going to do anything, make it better. When Tapulous was sold to Disney, Disney could have taken a lot of opportunities to make their lives more difficult. They actually made the benefits better for the team. Make it easier for them to want to be there. Don't meddle with things that don't matter. Whether it's what hour the team comes in the morning, or what bug check-in system they use, anything that doesn't matter, that doesn't really drive them to success. Because remember, this is a growth asset. It's not an efficiency-driven acquisition for the most part. Don't meddle with things that don't matter. Next point, to really get people through, which is what is going to be a tough period, because even if you don't do anything intentionally to meddle with the business or make their lives more difficult, you're still going to change things, because anytime you have an acquisition, there's just change. It could be changes matter as small as where they go to lunch, but there's going to be change. And you have to get people beyond that, because remember, they just lost their hope of changing the world a little bit. So you've got to get them through that and get them have a period where they buy into you. And it's really important that you put a short-term incentive program or retention program in place to make that happen. That retention program needs to be material. It needs to be at least as big as their expected bonus and maybe 2 or 3 times as big as their expected bonus. So they really feel like they've got to bear through this and understand the difference between the two companies as they go through it. You don't want people taking the phone calls that will happen the day after the acquisition occurs from headhunters. Once you've got the short term, you need to put a long-term incentive program in place that really appeals to the hope they had before. If someone, when they sold a company as an engineer, made $2 million, and your long-term incentive program for them is $50,000, you don't have a long-term incentive program. It may have felt like, you may think $50,000 is a lot of money, but remember, you just gave them $2 million as part of the acquisition to join the company. And unless you don't think they're important to creating that future value, which is often 80% of the value in an acquisition, then you need to figure out, unless you don't think they're important, you need to figure out how to put an equal incentive for them going forward. If that means you have to change the deal price to make that happen, then change the deal price, because you can put all the money up front to pay a high price on the deal. All you're doing is really making it worse for the long term. Next thing I've found to be really effective in terms of building that cultural bridge is taking 1, 2, 3, 4 employees and switching them around on a targeted basis. This is not meshing the teams or integrating the teams. You're still keeping them separate, but you take your CFO and making the acquirer CFO. You take your legal person and make him your GC. You take your HR person and put your HR person on the side of their team. You take your QA lead from the acquiring company and put them on the team who you just bought. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people who switch roles within the two companies as a way of starting the integration that you'll eventually do 18 months from now without pushing everything together in terms of common policies, common development environments, etc. A few people move back and forth. And then finally, the most important point I have to say is, of course, in any deal, the CEO's job is to make the deal successful, but it's hard to spend all your time doing that. And since most deals fail over people issues, I believe one of the most important things to do is identify one person in your company from the acquirer and say your only job is to make the people at the acquired company happy and successful and have a big impact. It is not to deliver just financial benefits. It's not to just deliver, an economic return, but just to make sure those people are happy. And taking one person saying that's your job is to make those people happy and measuring them on turnover, measuring them on the innovation that comes from that team, measuring them on the cultural fit, all that stuff really will drive you to at least think about those issues every day because you have a full-time person who's bringing it up to you. In the end, small companies are difficult to buy. They can have tremendous benefits to the acquirer over the long term, and that's been proven over and over again in Silicon Valley. But they rarely work out if they're opportunistic, because if they're opportunistic, you're not going to take the time to follow these steps because you just think you're getting a good deal. It's rarely you get a good deal just because you think you're getting a good deal. Most deals that change companies, you feel like you overpaid for, and you feel like you put way too much effort into these 8 steps, but that in the end is why they work.